So an agenda of what we'll be covering tonight. We're going to do introductions in just a moment. We'll share who's on this call. We'll talk about the purpose of your letters of recommendation. So who to ask, when to ask, how to ask, and what the letters should cover. We'll talk about some best practices. We'll give you some resources like examples and templates. And then we'll just kind of end with some takeaways and, kind of the overarching goal of what your letters are meant to achieve. Okay, so I'll introduce myself first. My name is Elise Rudolph. I'm the Director of Online Admissions and Recruitment here with Berkeley Public Health, and I'll pass things over to my colleague, Stephanie, to introduce herself.
Nice to meet you all, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Nguyen. My pronouns are she, hers. I'm the Online Education Recruitment Manager for the program. So my role is to support you with learning more about the program and also assisting you with the application process. I'm going to pass this over to Clinton, who is our alumnus in the program, and I'm so excited that you've joined us today, so passing it along.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Clinton, and I graduated from the UMF program in 2021, December, and I was in the Health Policy and Management stream. So I was an international student. I am Canadian, and I live in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Clinton. We're so excited to have you on today. Okay, so what's sort of the big picture, the purpose of having a letter of recommendation as part of our application process? So ideally, the letter of recommendation should be written by someone who can recommend your work or academic performance. And the purpose is to provide insight into what you were like as a student, a professional, a person, and ultimately a potential candidate in our program. So this is an opportunity for someone who knows you well to provide valuable details that might not be obvious in other parts of your application. So they can, this is kind of an opportunity for someone to speak to the things that aren't apparent in other places of your application. All right, so who to ask? This is a really, I think, important part of the letter of recommendation process. Your letters of recommendation do need to be from either academic or professional sources. We highly encourage that at least one of your references focuses on your academic potential or your academic experiences. So they could be someone written by someone like a professor, a graduate student, instructor, or teaching assistant who may have worked with you in a class you took, or it could be a current or former supervisor who can still speak to your academic potential. So a common question Stephanie and I receive is, what if I've been out of the workforce, or I'm sorry, what if I've been out of school for a number of years? Well, first of all, that's very typical of our applicants, so it's completely okay, but we still would like to see at least one of your letters speaking to your academic potential. So if you're asking a number of folks who you know in a professional capacity, I encourage you to kind of coach one or more of those references on how to speak to your academic potential or any sort of academic traits that you've exemplified in your work. The second type of letter that you can submit is a professional reference. And so at least one of your references should focus on your professional potential. So this should be from a current or former employer or supervisor, ideally. So it can be from a colleague. It's always a little bit better if it comes from a supervisor. And it can also be from someone you've worked with in the past if you aren't currently working or you don't feel comfortable asking your current supervisor for whatever reason, which we understand. So it can be from a past employer as well. And they're going to want to speak to, again, your professional potential. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but we do require a total of 3 references. So one academic, one professional, and your third reference can be either academic or professional. So it's really up to you based on what stage of life you're in, if you feel that you have more access to academic references versus professional references. But again, even if they're all professional or they're, all academic contacts, try to make sure that at least one of your letters is touching on academic potential and at least one of your letters is touching on professional potential. And the reason for that is because we are a professional graduate degree program. So in this master's degree program, we expect you to obviously, achieve a Berkeley level of academic environment. And also this is a program that's designed for working professionals. So the people in your cohort and the faculty you're working with really are like your colleagues in a lot of ways. And certainly they will be your colleagues and professional contacts when you leave the program. So we really want to get a sense of again, your academic potential and your professional potential.
So moving on to how to ask, there's many ways to approach this, but commonly most of our students tend to either use the in-person or remote options. You can approach this by using office hours. You can send a formal email or schedule a 10-minute chat. It doesn't need to be a long conversation, but it can just be a coffee chat, for example, references with professors. On a professional setting, it may be at work, it can be in an email, and similarly in a scheduled 10-minute chat or so. There are a few things to keep in mind as you decide what works best for you, and we recommend to ask them as soon as possible. We hear all the time from faculty that they have a lot of letters of recommendations in queue, and it would always have been nice to be requested to write letters much sooner rather than later. But we do understand that you may have learned about the program a little late. So if that's the case, be sure to be apologetic and considerate of their time and bandwidth. But ultimately, the earlier the better to ensure a quality letter of recommendation can be written for you and that is submitted on time. You also want to keep in mind that they are busy, as I mentioned, or may not even agree to write your letter in the first place, given that they have different circumstances or capacities. So plan a list of potential recommenders and start reaching out to them. And don't take it personal. Sometimes a no is actually favorable. And you want to also provide relevant materials such as your resume or CV, a description of the program, and your reasoning for applying. And your application deadline, it's very important that you share with them when you're anticipating submitting your application. They'll be given the deadline formally through our application portal, but maybe you want to apply sooner and meet that priority deadline, right? So it's always helpful to give them an update of your timeline to prep them. And they must be submitted by your application deadline. So even if you anticipated that they would get their letter in at the same time, but they don't, still note that they have until the actual application deadline to submit their letter of recommendation electronically. And Clinton is on the call today, and I would love to learn a bit more about your experience navigating, securing letters of recommendation. So how did you approach asking for letters of recommendation when you applied to graduate school?
Hi, everybody. So when I applied, I did have one letter, one academic reference, and two professional. In terms of the academic reference, I was still connected to my university because I did go back to my home department for some teaching duties. So I was still connected in that way. I'm a speech language pathologist by training. So at the time I was still connected with the speech school, and I was able to get secure a letter from one of the professor who was on my panel for my master's thesis, who clearly understood my work and my previous experience and how it relates to this application. And he was also the professor for the course that I was teaching, so it all worked out. And then in terms of professional references, I did go to the medical director and the operations director at the health center that I was working at the time, who also know my work quite well, my clinical and career work quite well, and who also understand my aspirations and my career goals. So yeah, in terms of the process, I did do some of the things that's on the slide here. I did give them enough time. When I did plan in-person meeting with all three of my references, where I actually did my letter for my personal statement, my statement of personal history, and my statement of purpose before I meet with them, so that I can actually share my statement with them. And then when they write the reference letters, that they're able to strategize and focus on the areas that I would like them to focus on, that highlights my strengths and my goals. So I think, yeah, so some strategizing. And then I guess that also ties into who you may want to ask. So in terms, depending on what content is in your, the other statements that you're writing, you may choose the person writing the letter for you accordingly. So those would be my advice. Yeah.
Thank you. And moving along with that, what to emphasize? So there's so many approaches to your letters of recommendation, because you have built a community of people that know you in different capacities, right? So it's best to think about how they know you and for how long. Most likely somebody that's worked with you for a number of years, or a good length of time, can speak to your growth and development. And think about, why are you a good fit for the program? As Clinton mentioned, having your statements available, if you're even comfortable with that, can also be helpful for them to get a good sense of fit for program and just what we also offer. So it helps them kind of understand what our school's mission, vision, and values look like. How does that align with your approach to graduate school and your personal goals? What sets you apart from other applicants? Think about an outstanding accomplishment that you might want to highlight. Their personal impressions of your intellectual ability, character, and skills. So there's a lot to talk about there. Your promise of productive scholarship and ability for analytical thinking and research. Your potential to succeed in the public health field, highlighting your skills and quality of previous work, your approach to solve problems and complete projects. And lastly, any obstacles that you've had to overcome to attain your educational and professional goals. A lot of these are really keys to getting a full holistic picture. And that's really what makes a strong letter of recommendation. We're not focusing on just one area, but we can really gain a better sense of the different qualities and abilities that you have, not only as a person and professional, but also as a student entering or maybe re-entering graduate school again. I want to focus back on to you, Clinton. I'd love to just hear, which you did kind of touch upon, but did you have any strategies for selecting recommenders who would write the most compelling letters for you? Was there anything specific that was on your must-have list?
Yeah, I think definitely the fit, like definitely picking somebody who knows my work and my work ethics well. Certainly my professor at the university, working with him for like a good 2 years through my previous master's degree, he definitely knows my career academic work. And then at my work, the two operations, at the time I had some opportunities to do some kind of like project-wise, center-wide projects with the ops director and the medical director. So through those work experience, I also have a good vibe that they will be able to give me a pretty solid reference based on my work with them, my partnership with them on some of those projects.
Thank you for that. Something I actually like to add to this space here is that a lot of students tend to shy away from talking about discrepancies or gaps, and I actually think you can leverage that with your references. So in the event that maybe you had a gap year, or there was something where you had to build your skill set, you can definitely have your references talk about that, as you might even include that in your personal statements. And that could be helpful when we're looking at your essays in addition to your references. We can see an alignment, and it further endorses what you've been talking about and reference to. So just keep in mind that it's completely okay, and the most important thing is that we get a holistic view of you as a potential graduate candidate within our program. And I'm going to pass this back to Elise to discuss a little bit more about the best practices for you.
Yeah, so we've touched on some of these things throughout, but just to kind of really drive home, you want to tell your writer why you need the recommendation letter. So you'll want to provide them some context into, why you're applying to graduate school, why they need to submit a letter on your behalf. So it might be, giving them some information about the admissions process. You want to ask someone that you believe knows you well and can speak highly of you. This might go without saying, but every once in a while we do see, a letter of recommendation that's not too flattering. And so you just want to make sure that you're being really thoughtful about your relationship to the person you're asking, how you're asking them. All of those things can play into, making sure that you're going to get a really glowing letter of reference. So you could consider asking someone who has earned the degree which you're seeking. That's obviously ideal. Our admissions committee always love to see letters of recommendation who are written by folks who have an MPH degree. You can ask someone who has academically or professionally evaluated you in the past, someone who has experience writing letters for other students, and or maybe they helped with their entry into professional or graduate school. So, you can always tap into your network and see if there's a professor who you work with who, does this commonly for their students. You'll want to present deadlines and get a clear yes or no answer from the person you're asking as to whether or not they can write the letter. And you want to follow up with reminders, thank you emails, kind of stay engaged with them. Clinton touched on this, and I think it's such an important piece, which is share materials. Provide your resume, your CV, give them your application essays if you've written them already, or if you haven't finished your essays, but maybe you have an outline, you can provide that. The more information you can give them, the better. You can give them your transcripts. I would even say it's not listed here, but if it's like an employer, you can give them kind of some bullet points of things you've accomplished in the last year or so in your role, because even if it's your supervisor, it's always helpful to kind of jog their memory about all of the wonderful things you're doing for their, your employer. You want to diversify your recommendation letters. So, if you can get kind of an array, again, academic, professional, from current or former employers, that's always nice. And one thing to note here at the end is when you're requesting these letters of reference, you'll actually do it through our application system. And when you're sending out those reference requests through the system, it will ask you if you'd like to waive your right to view the letter of reference. Now, you have the freedom to select yes or no. However, I will say it's standard practice to waive your right to view the letter of reference. And we generally encourage this as it shows kind of trust in the person who's writing your reference, things like that. So that is the standard practice, and we do encourage it. Now, I wanted to hand it back to Clinton and ask, I think you touched on this a little bit, but if you could share more about how you prepared your recommenders to ensure they had enough information to write a personalized and strong recommendation. So maybe you can walk us through kind of those in-person meetings you had with them.
Yeah. First of all, I did not remember that was one of the steps in terms of waiving, but I would recommend waiving. And I think now that you've mentioned it, I think I did ask for just waiving. I don't want to see the reference, just for the reasons that Elise has touched on, just, to build trust and to demonstrate to the admission committee too that I fully trust the people who are writing the letters for me. In terms of prep, I think a few pieces. So for sure, for them to have a basic understanding of the program that I'm applying into, why I'm trying to apply into the program, why the program, and why now. I think that would be super helpful. The significance, I think usually people see UC Berkeley as like, wow, that's significant. So, but just in case that you want to let them know about, the significance of this application to you. And I guess sometimes creating alignment, like how would this degree, if it's like, if you already work in healthcare, if you already work, if you intend to continue to work in the organization upon completion of the degree, then I would also talk, which is what I did. I would then talk about how this degree will help me add more value to the organization in the long run. And then in terms of other materials, yes, absolutely. As I mentioned, share your essays with them. I did share my academic transcripts with my professional references because they didn't necessarily knew how I did as a student. So it was good for them to know. And vice versa, I did in my meeting with my academic reference professor, I did tell him a little bit about how I've been doing in my work life. And yeah. So, and then, yeah, I also had my resume with them as well. Yeah, I think as somebody, because I think in my work and I guess in my work, I also write recommendation and reference letters for other people. And I think about what is most helpful for me. I think definitely I really want to know that person very well, because if I've been approached by somebody who I didn't know very well, I'll be like, I don't know. And I'm also not very good at declining requests. So sometimes I have got myself stuck in situations where I didn't feel good about it after either, that I was not able to produce the best reference for the person. But given that I don't have a lot of understanding of that person's life or that person's work, that's all I could do. So definitely going with somebody who definitely knows you very well. I think having some clear directions from the person I'm writing the letter for was also very helpful, like what they want me to highlight. Yeah, and just kind of like even the length of the letter and how yeah, so I think just what to focus on basically, I think would be very helpful, because there are a lot of nice things we can say about people, but how do we do it in a concise way? Understanding that the admission committee has a lot of letters and a lot of letters and essays to go through every time there's an intake. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's just super helpful information. Thank you, Clinton. Okay, so we talked about best practices for you as the person requesting the letter. And now we're going to cover what are some best practices for the folks who are writing your letters. And also, we will provide these slides, but these are things you're welcome to also share with your letter writers as part of kind of all of the materials that you're giving them to help them write the letters. This is something you're also welcome to provide them. So the letter should indicate your full name, preferably right from the beginning in the first paragraph. They should be typewritten or word processed to ensure proper scanning. They should be printed on professional letterhead. That's really important. We want to make sure that all the letters we receive are authentic. And so it helps when they're on professional letterhead. The letters require a written signature, so in blue or black ink. So even if they're scanning their letter in, they should sign it. And they should conclude with a legible identifying personal information, their name, their title, the institution or organization that they work for, mailing address, all of those things. I think Clinton sort of touched on this, which is really important. And it's that, we do receive a lot of letters of reference. And of course, you want yours to be as personal as possible. So you might want to coach them to avoid using overly broad descriptors, like this is a fantastic person to work with. You can kind of coach them through, what are the specific things that you've accomplished or you've done that make you a fantastic person to work with. You don't want to focus too much on a student's characteristic traits. So this is something that we also see commonly. We have an example here, Oski, that's UC Berkeley's mascot, if you don't know. Oski is always friendly and warm. Those are wonderful qualities, but they don't necessarily speak to your academic ability nor your professional ability. So you want to, again, make sure that the folks writing your references are driving in your capacity to succeed in this program. And while being friendly and warm are fantastic, they don't necessarily connect to, the reasons why you'll be successful here in this program. Lastly, in accordance with federal laws and university policy, authors of letters of recommendation are asked to refrain from comments regarding a candidate's race, color, gender, religion, age, physical or mental disability, marital status, sexual orientation, national origin, citizenship, medical condition, or political affiliation, beliefs, or activities. So these are all protected characteristics. They are things that we do not take into account as part of the application process. And so it's really important that the folks writing your references also do not mention these protected characteristics. I'm going to pivot here because I think a really important part of this whole process is ensuring that the folks writing your references have adequate time to get them in. As you can see from this slide, there's a lot of things they have to keep in mind and do to write you a quality letter. And so, Clinton, I wanted to ask, how did you follow up with your recommenders to ensure that they got the letters of reference in on time without feeling like you were being too pushy?
Great question. And I am not good at that because I'm always too scared to follow up with people because I don't want people to feel that I'm harassing them. But you do kind of want to follow up. So my strategy is that before I start, I also pick people who I know are 100% reliable and so that I know for sure that they are going to do it for me. Because in my previous master's degree application process, there are professors who are known in the department who are tardy, if you will, in writing letters, or who may or may not, who would agree to write a letter and then in the end not writing. So you would want to avoid taking those risks as much as possible. Then you want to ask reliable people. You also, depending on your relationship with the different people you're thinking about asking, picking somebody who also doesn't mind you following up with them. Like if it's somebody who know you very well, you have a very close working relationship with, you follow up with them anyway in your work life or your academic life that with many things, then I think that will just make it a bit easier and more natural to just follow up with people. And I think, just giving people a lot of time to complete. And then most people are for my references, they were all happy with letting me know once it's done. So I think setting that expectation at the outset is they can kindly let you know that they have completed the reference. Those would be my strategies.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I'll hand it back to Stephanie.
Thank you. So we wanted to share an example of what we commonly see on a letter of recommendation if you've been kind of curious with that. So as we mentioned, key components should include the date, when it was written, name, first and last of the person writing the LOR, the title of the person writing the letter of recommendation, company or organization of the name of the person writing the LOR, and the body. So one page is actually sufficient for us. That you do not need to have your references write anything longer than a page. But if they choose to, that's okay too. We again really want the reference to just have the ability to speak to your potential, both academically and professionally. So commonly, or to the right that you'll see here, you'll commonly see a logo from the company letterhead, and you'll see some details. And this is probably about as, if not maybe even a full page, this is pretty common for what most references would include. And again, feel free to share this with your references if they need an example of the layout. And I'll pass this back to Elise to discuss the overarching message.
Awesome. So we definitely understand that writing a strong letter of recommendation can be stressful for the folks who you're asking to do them. You know, it is a big ask. I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind, and providing them as many resources as possible actually makes it easier for them, and you know, it relieves some of that stress. Stephanie mentioned this earlier, but do not take it personally if someone declines your request. There's a number of reasons someone might decline to write it. It might just be that they're super busy, they're kind of at capacity in their work or personal life. Maybe it's that they think very highly of you, but they don't feel like they know you in the right capacity to write an academic letter. You know, so and ultimately, if someone declines, they're really doing you a favor, because it's, you know, if somebody accepts who isn't confident in their ability to write a letter of reference for you, it's not going to come out the way that you want it to anyway. So if they decline, don't take it personally and consider it a positive thing, and move on to the next person. So again, we want to reiterate, provide them with early deadlines. Even if you know the application deadline, you know, it helps to let them know maybe it's like a little bit earlier than that to make sure that they get it done in time. And you want to ask early as well. You don't want to wait too long, because again, you want to make sure that this person has adequate time to write you something thoughtful and personal. And then Clinton mentioned this, but once you submit your reference contact information in your application, they will receive instructions on how to submit your recommendation letter. You can always check in with them and just make sure they got it, or you can ask them to let you know when they get it. But essentially, when you go into the system and input their contact information, they will receive an automated message. It'll give them instructions on how to submit their letter. And you will always be notified when they submit their letter. But it always can be nice to have them just personally let you know as well.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about what else you should know. As we mentioned a few times, can you submit your application before your recommendation? Yes. What's the deadline to submit the letters of recommendation? It is the same as your application deadline. So if you're choosing the fall 2025 application, make sure that you let them know which deadline that you're seeking, because the system will, I believe, only show as March 2nd. So that's one thing to call out and be prepared for if you're trying to aim for the January 5th deadline. However, just know that your time of submission is their time of submission. That's the most important takeaway for that. For the last bit is occasionally we get this. What if my recommender is unable to submit an LOR in English? Well, it is required to be translated by an accredited translation service. So you'll want to make sure that they go through a reputable organization such as atanet.org. And the last thing is that we'd love for you to stay connected with us. We have a ton of amazing information sessions and workshops coming up this semester. We encourage you to reach out to us as well. So if you have any questions at all about the program or the application process, reach out to us. Our admissions email is online.mph@berkeley.edu. And keep in touch with us through our socials. We're active on LinkedIn, Instagram. We love to highlight any updates and just keep you in the loop with what our students are and faculty are up to. And if you prefer to have one-on-one advising, I do offer 30-minute appointments that you can schedule through our scheduler. And again, we're going to open this floor up for Q&A. So I hope that you found this useful, and we'd love to hear your questions.
And I'll also just add that we are happy to take questions that aren't directly related to letters of reference as well. If that's, you know, if you want to ask about the program or another aspect of the admissions process, you're welcome to do that. And we have a question in the chat. Not a silly question at all. The question is, are applications submitted by the priority deadline considered prior to those submitted after the priority deadline? Yes, that is correct. So if you submit your application by January 3rd, our priority deadline, we do a first round of admissions reviews, and we will release decisions a couple months after that, usually around March. Whereas our final deadline is in March, and those applicants won't hear usually until May. So you hear back a couple months earlier if you apply by the priority deadline. Yeah. And I'm excited to see, all of you on this session tonight are getting things started early, which is fantastic. And, definitely keep that priority deadline in mind since you've got a couple months to meet that. Yeah, here's a great question. If you feel that the academic LOR might be weak due to attending a large institution and being out of college for 4+ years, do you recommend 3 professional letters of reference on top of 1 academic letter? Worried that the academic LOR may not be the strongest? Yeah, that's a really great question. So if you feel that you would not have a strong academic reference available, you are welcome to just use professional references. What I would encourage in that case is to coach at least one of those references on how to speak to your academic ability in their letter. So, I think Clinton mentioned this, but he provided his transcripts to even his professional references. And then you can even make the connection for them if if you want to say, like, I worked on this project at work and I used these like research skills, or I used I used statistics and this kind of it's okay to make the connection for them into like how you're using academic abilities in your work life. So you might want to help kind of coach one of those professional letters to speak to your academic capacity. Yeah, I don't know, Stephanie or Clinton, if you would add anything to that.
I fully agree. And I think the only other bit I might add is think about the concentration you're applying to. So if you are focused on something like epidemiology and biostatistics, and maybe have, alluding back to what Elise said, if there's any particular programs or quantitative skills, things that kind of align with the direction you're going towards, that can be extremely helpful, because again, we'll have your essays and we'll want to gain a holistic review of what they're saying and get a full sense of the skill sets you already have, or maybe you want to sharpen. So that's a great opportunity to find alignment between the concentration you're picking or your goal, and as she mentioned, just coaching them to include.
Yeah, I would agree. And I was actually on a different topic. I was actually just looking back in my emails to see what happened when I applied. So apparently the system generates, and I don't know if it still happens, but when the letter of recommendation is submitted by your person, I actually got an email confirmation that it's been submitted. So I guess that's one way to find out whether things were submitted. So yeah, so apparently that's what happened.
It is still the same. And if there's any takeaway, I actually looked at Clinton's application profile and the notes. The faculty actually made a point to say that he had excellent and outstanding references. So if there's any takeaway, his advice is going to be most useful for today.
Good to know.
I just wanted to add to, Stephanie's comment about tying your letters of reference to the concentration you're applying to. I would say this is, as Stephanie mentioned, this is especially helpful if you have only professional references and you're kind of trying to help coach one of those references to speak to your academic abilities. I would encourage you to kind of check out the classes for the concentration you're applying to, those are available on our website. You can look at the curriculum and see a brief course description. If you're applying to health policy and management, it's going to be a pretty set curriculum. So you can take a look at that and maybe provide that to your references as well. So they get a sense of, what are the academic skills the program is looking for, and then they can speak to those capabilities. Great question. So if you submitted an application by the priority deadline and worst case scenario happens and one of your letters of reference doesn't submit their letter by the priority deadline, could your application still be considered for the March deadline? Absolutely, absolutely, which is another great reason to aim for that priority deadline. If for whatever reason things don't come in time, we will just consider you in that next round of admissions reviews. Assuming that your application is complete at that point. Any other questions?
I will be sure to send out the slides and the recording roughly in about 48 hours or so. So do expect that from me. And we encourage you to send these slides out to your references as well. We really want to make sure that you are able to submit a competitive and just a well-rounded application. And if there's any way to support you through your references, we want to make sure that they have all the tools to be successful in speaking in reference to you.
All right, well, if there's no more questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up the session. Thank you all so much for spending some time with us this evening, and a huge thank you, Clinton, for sharing your experiences as one of our incredible alumni. And again, feel free to contact us at online.mph@berkeley.edu if we didn't get to your question or if some come up later. All right, have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.